Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Moss again here at allpointstv.com and also WFOV 92.1. Want to thank you for tuning in. I'll be here for the next hour. Hope you'll stay with us. We want to continue a couple of things that we started 2 weeks ago. And we started off talking about how what is happening now with the intelligence community trying to topple the Trump administration, how that then lends itself to what would have occurred in other administrations where we had other administrations toppled. And I'm talking here in particular about the Nixon administration, which is covered in Russ Baker's book called Family of Secrets. And then before that, in terms of the toppling of the administration that was elected in 1960, the Kennedy administration, in which John F. Kennedy was assassinated on the 22nd of November, 1963. And what does that mean in terms of what's happening right now? What does that mean in terms of what had happened in earlier moments in our history where there was a toppling of administrations? Or in this case here, the attempted toppling of administration. And what does that mean? With the intelligence community now we know was involved in it. So what are the implications of that then for earlier times in the country's history where administrations were toppled? And I'm talking about even going back to the assassination of Abraham Lincoln and just looking at something in the background during this time. And we now have a chance to bring it out into the open, because I think we have to now open up a wider scope in our investigation, not just to investigate those who tried to and were not successful in topping the Trump administration, but what are the implications of that in terms of what happened in Watergate. Russ Baker does a very good job of covering that, and what happened in Dealey Plaza. We were reading in the last program some excerpts from the book written by Craig Roberts. It's called Kill Zone. A sniper looks at Dealey Plaza. And Craig Roberts, a former sniper in the Vietnam War and one of the expert shooters, went to Dealey Plaza to look over that site to see if what had occurred the way in which it was in fact fashioned by the Warren Commission report, which was commissioned by the Johnson administration, which benefited from the assassination. This is hard to take when you think about maybe our voice is not the last word in how this country is run. Maybe there are some other voices here that are canceling out the will of the American people. And the Kill Zone is raising this question. A sniper looks at Dealey Plaza. Let me continue reading because I want to get to the other topics also. Let me read the rest of this one part of the Kill Zone. What he's done here in this part is put himself in the 6th floor window in the school depository building on the corner of Houston and Elm Street, which means that motorcade, the Kennedy motorcade, comes right underneath that window where that sniper is perched on the 6th floor. So he puts himself in the place where the shooter is, and we were told to Lee Harvey Oswald. I'm convinced it was not Oswald, but that's the official report. He says it's a warm, muggy November day, but only 2 windows on the 6th floor are open in the unconditioned building. You're sweating, both because of the heat and because of what you are getting ready to do. For some unfathomable reason, you pick a confined area of Elm Street as your kill zone. You have disregarded Houston Street, which is aligned perfectly with your corner of the building, affording you a straight head-on shot for over a block where the motorcade will move slowly towards you, because the motorcade is now going north after having turned off Main Street where it was going west, it turned right onto Houston Street. It's now going north. It's going right toward that building that's on the corner of Houston and Elms. Is going right there toward that window on the 6th floor of the school depository building. And it's getting closer and closer because it's going right in the line of fire of that window. But that shooter in that window does not take that shot. For some unfathomable reason, you have picked the confined area of Elm Street as your kill zone. You have disregarded Houston Street, which is aligned perfectly with your corner of the building, affording you a straight head-on shot for over a block. Because once that car turns off of Main onto Houston, for 1 block is heading right toward that shooter. He says, now it's time. The motorcade is approaching. You work the bolt on the counter rifle, chambering an unpredictable round, a 6.5 millimeter cartridge. You wait. The motorcade turns the corner onto Elm, each vehicle almost stopping as they negotiate the 120-degree turn. That right there is a violation. There's the president in the kill zone. His car is turning from Houston Street onto Elm Street, making a 120-degree turn, which means that car has to almost come to a halt right underneath that window, and the shooter still does not take a shot. That's the best place to shoot the president. No shot is in fact taken. The second best place was a car coming down Houston Street, going right toward that building, and the shot is not taken at that point either. And there must be a reason why that shot is not taken. We'll talk about that if I get through with the rest of this reading. You hold your breath. Try your best to relax. Aim the weapon, centering on the head of the President of the United States in your scope. Take up the slack from the trigger and squeeze. Your last shot, and supposedly there were 3 shots fired from that window. Your last shot, the car is now at maximum range. The shooting starts when the person has moved down from the window. While the president's underneath the window, no shots are fired. While he's coming toward that window, no shots are fired. It's only when the shot becomes more difficult that the shooting starts. And that tells me what? Or that tells anyone to study this what? That there are other shooters that are positioned in Dealey Plaza. Otherwise, if it's a single shooter, you want the shot to be taken when it's the most vulnerable place the president is. There are 2 places of great vulnerability. Coming toward the shooter on Houston Street, and they're making the turn from Houston Street to Elm Street. And the shots are not taken at that point. That right there is enough to show conspiracy. You don't need anything else. Your last shot, he says, the car is now at maximum range, actually almost out of view. But miraculously, for some reason, the car slows almost to a complete stop. You can see the brake lights come on. Once the shooting starts, you can see the brake lights on the car the president's in. You can see the brake lights come on. So rather than speeding away, the president's car comes to a stop after the shooting has already begun in Dealey Plaza. The policeman, Dallas motorcycle officer Marion Baker, ask your boss if you are an employee. He runs into the building. Marion Baker runs into the building. The last shots have been fired. He knows some of the shots have come from the book depository. He runs into the building. He arrives on the 2nd floor, and there's Lee Harvey Oswald in the cafeteria. The policeman, Dallas motorcycle officer Marion Baker, asks your boss, who's also with the officer as they're going up to the 6th floor, if you are an employee. He's pointing to Oswald, asking the the building owner or the one that is managing the building, they asked if Oswald, who is now drinking a Coke on the second floor in the cafeteria, he asked, with his gun drawn, if Oswald is an employer. When this is confirmed that he is an employer, the officer breaks away to search the floors above. He's going to the 6th floor at that point. 23 years, he says, after those shots were fired, I, meaning Craig Roberts, I walked away from the window in disgust. I had seen all I needed to know that Oswald could not have been the lone shooter. If he was in fact, and this is what I'm saying, even if he in fact was a shooter at all. I don't think Oswald did the shooting that day. And there are a lot of reasons why I say so based on what I have been researching over the course of about 40 years now. He says, as I walked toward the elevator, I began to look at the scene as a police officer. If one could forget that the victim was a president of the United States and this was a political assassination and simply work the scene as a standard homicide, perhaps it could be put into manageable perspective. The next thing that would have to be done would be to examine the rest of Dealey Plaza. A homicide scene, he says, is not simply the place the body was found, it is the entire area of influence that might contain clues. In this case, the crime scene was anywhere within the range of a high-power rifle. I walked out of the book depository building across the street. I stopped for a moment and looked around. There were several possible spots for a second shooter, which meant that more than 2 riflemen could have been positioned. Exactly what positions were utilized depended upon the physical trajectories of the bullets that had been fired. That would come later. I walked all around Dealey Plaza, he says, exploring any spot that I felt might serve the purpose of a sniper. Finally, I arrived at the grassy knoll and the picket fence, which I had purposely saved for last. I walked up the slopes and around the fence, arriving in a parking lot that was bordered on the northwest by train tracks. I walked the length of the fence, stopping at a spot on the eastern end. I looked over the fence at Elm Street and froze. This is exactly where I would position myself if I wanted the most accurate shot possible considering the terrain. It had some drawbacks. It was close to witnesses and prone to pre-incident discovery, but the advantages far outweighed the disadvantages for a determined assassin. The target vehicle would be approaching instead of moving away, thereby continually decreasing the range. The shot would be almost flat trajectory, making the down angle formula a moot point, because a bullet falling at a rate of speed going downward, it'd be much harder to make the target, to hit the target. But this is a straight shot where that grassy knoll area is located and that picket fence is located, where a lot of witnesses ran to that side, ran to that grassy knoll area when that last shot was in fact fired. And we know from the way the president's body reacts to that shot, that's a front shot. And that right there, he eliminates Oswald having fired that last shot in the president's head. In fact, 2 shots hit the president simultaneously. 1/100th second apart from each other. One knocks him forward temporarily, the other one knocks him violently to the back. The president was caught in triangular fire. Looking almost due east, going back to the reading here, looking almost due east across a grassy open park like plaza, I could see 2 multi-story office-type buildings approximately the same height as the depository. The rooftops of either building would be excellent firing positions for a trained rifleman with the proper equipment, and would be the places I would select if I wanted the best possible chance of not being detected in advance. Without going to the roofs of each, I could not determine the accessibility of escape routes, but for firing platforms, they were ideal. Then, considering the possibility of multiple snipers, which meant a conspiracy, I had to ask myself how I would position the shooters to cover the kill zone in front of the grassy knoll. My military training once again took over. I could use an area within the plaza that would afford the best kill zone for either a crossfire or a triangulated fire. Simply put, I would position my teams in such a way that their trajectory of fire converged on the most advantageous point to assure a kill. In the military, single snipers are seldom used, and they were not used in Dealey Plaza. There were 3 teams of 2 people to each team, a spotter and a rifleman. That's what the evidence indicates. Normally, go back to the reading here, normally the smaller sniper team consists of 2 men, a sniper and his spotter / security man. Even in police SWAT teams, a workman has an observer who is equipped with a spotting scope or binoculars to help pick and identify targets and handle the radio communications. And we see radio communications in Dealey Plaza. We see a person sitting at the curve on a walkie-talkie. Right there next to him, standing up, is the umbrella man, who is in fact letting his umbrella up and down, apparently indicating that the headshot the president had not been killed. The headshot has not been fired yet. There were bullets that had missed. I think there were probably about 6 bullets. Some have counted as many. Some have counted based upon the acoustics, counted 11 shots that were fired. By this time, it was growing late. He's saying here that he was going to overlook the site and go to other sites to look at other possible scenarios that could have occurred on the 22nd of November. But it had grown late. He was doing a banquet, but he had already had enough information about what would have occurred because he had checked out the more likely zones that the shots could have been fired from. He says, it had been a day in which I had discovered that the United States government had lied to me all of my adult life. The same government that had sent me to Vietnam had sacrificed over 50,000 of my peers for no discernible gain, and had withdrawn from Southeast Asia after supposedly securing Nixon's peace with honor. He says, honor. I had just discovered what I later found so many others had discovered before. A coup d'etat had occurred and then had been successfully covered up at the highest levels of government for over a quarter of a century. I found it hard to sleep that night. The assassination of John F. Kennedy was not the issue. It was the fact that the government, my government, had lied to me. As a police officer sworn to uphold the law, there are no stratus levels in criminals. A liar, a thief, or a murderer is exactly that. There's no one who has the privilege to commit a crime without prosecution. And there is no time restraint on the prosecution. Every rookie of every police academy in the country learns one thing above all: no one is above the law. Not even the President of the United States, he's talking here about Johnson, or those who control him. And that is the particulars in a nutshell of what occurred as the president was taken out through a different mean that was what was being used to take Trump out. And because it backfired, we now have a chance to peel the onion, layers of the onion back. But will they go into the other cases or not remains to be seen. But it certainly opens up that particular point, because if they were doing this now, then these other cases also stand to be investigated. And Russ Baker has done a good job of exposing what occurred in terms of the Nixon, the Watergate overthrow of the president, the coup d'etat of Richard Nixon. Because Richard Nixon did not order that coup d'etat. That much is clear. It looks like there was CIA inside of the Nixon administration. I'll call the names. E. Howard Hunt, who was also in Dealey Plaza, is also in the Nixon administration. It is out of his office that the order was given to break into Watergate. And in the Watergate burglary, 5 burglars going into the Watergate building, one of them was James McCord, who I think, and evidence shows, deliberately put tape on that door so as to raise suspicion of the break-in. You probably remember the story. Willis went down the hallway and saw tape on the door, thought somebody had inadvertently left the tape on the door, took the tape off the door, and continued on his route to check the building out. He came back down the hallway later on and found somebody had put the tape back on the door. And that's when he knew there was somebody in the building, because he had taken the tape off the door, somebody put it back on there. And that's when he drew his gun and went in the room where the person was hiding out. James McCord did that. James McCord was CIA. And that's in Russ Baker's book, and that authenticates what my own research has shown, because I investigated that also. What I didn't have, the only part of the quiz I didn't have, the puzzle I didn't have was, I thought it was a toppling by such persons as Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward. I thought the toppling of it was just the press keeping in front of the public for 2 years, from 1972 to 1974. I did not see that there was something in back of that, because I was too starry-eyed to understand that there was a renegade, outlawed, criminal enterprise in our government at that point. But of that today, given what is happening with Brennan, Clapper, Comey, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and others, and some of these other persons there, we now know Andrew Weissman, also in his case, they were targeting a duly elected president of the United States and trying to overthrow a president who was in power that they disagreed with, and they were trying to overthrow that person and get him out of office. And they're still working on that right now as we speak. And that ball is now in your court, Mr. Barr. And we'll see how you handle it, because we have a chance now to peel back that onion and uncover this conspiratorial group that's running things behind the scenes in this country. We'll see if they go. They might not open up the Kennedy assassination. I don't expect them to do so. But let's see if anyone is going to be prosecuted for what we now know was the intelligence community trying to overthrow the Trump administration. And he really had intended to put Donald Trump in jail, quite frankly. That was the intent. And if he had lost, he would have gone to jail. And there are some that are saying that once he steps down from office, they plan to prosecute him after his term is over. That talk is still going on, because they want to make a statement here about breaking into what is a club here that's run by 2 different power groups that have the nerve. It takes some nerve, the audacity, to call themselves Democrats and call themselves Republicans. You have to be brainwashed, be calling yourself after these party names. There are no Democrats in Washington. It's not about Democrats and Republicans. It's about power. And these names are just another diversion that they have to throw people off about what really is going on in this country behind the scenes. They are running this country from behind the scenes. And if Barr is independent of this apparatus, you call it the deep state, then we will find it out by whether or not he goes forward with prosecution. Okay, we're going to take a break right now with WFOV, and they'll be back hopefully on the other side of the break in 4 minutes. Okay, we're going to continue what we're saying here, but they will be taking a break, 4-minute break, and we'll welcome you back in 4 minutes. So that we'll see what happens here. I'm watching it very carefully and looking to see what they're going to do. And if this is a authentic investigation, if Barr is who we think he is, someone who is really committed to cleaning this thing up, we will know that by whether or not people are prosecuted that in fact were involved in this behind the scenes trying to topple the Trump administration. And you saw some of it yourself, though. You saw when Mueller was testifying before the House Judiciary Committee, headed by Nadler, who is now talking about they're going forward with impeachment, which I predicted they're going to do that. They have to do it because they cannot stop now. They have to go with impeachment. Not that they're going to bring about conviction, but they have to bring about impeachment to keep the country distracted. They can't stop now. They're too far down the road. They can't say that was a scam, because if they stop, then the American people will know all of this was nothing but a bogus sham operation placed upon the American people and the taxpayers to the tune of $32 million, and they cannot admit that. That's why they cannot stop at this point. And just waiting for the right moment to pull the lever of impeachment. And all it takes here, unlike what they're saying what it takes, all it takes here is a majority vote in the House of Representatives, and the Democrats control the House of Representatives. Not because they won the House of Representatives, but because it was handed to them by the Republican Party. 36. I read last week it was 33. 33, according to their count, my count was 36. I said 23 had stepped down and did not run for another office, and 16 stepped down from the House and ran for another office. So my count was that there were 39, but okay, I'll go with their numbers. They said 33 Republicans in 2018 did not choose to run for another term. Why did 33 people all of a sudden decide to abdicate their position in the House of Representatives all of a sudden? How many times have you seen people going out voluntarily and relinquishing power after running for a number of terms and standing down as they did, and then giving majority over to the Democrats so as to further expose this president? And then look at what happened in terms of the appointment of the special prosecutor that would not have occurred if, in fact, the Attorney General from Alabama had not recused himself. The senator who became the Attorney General, who recused himself, and that put another actor, who I think was a deep state actor, Rod Rosenstein, in charge of the State Department. And then he appoints Mueller, formerly of the FBI. He appoints Mueller as the head of the investigation, and Mueller then appoints Andre Weissman. Somebody ought to go ahead and investigate and look at his resume and see what he's done in terms of investigating and overthrowing different and putting people in jail that are innocent. Go read the book written by Sidney Powell in her book called License to Lie. Sidney Powell, by the way, is now the attorney for Flynn, General Flynn. Read her book. All those pieces are there to be put together for prosecutorial purposes. I want to welcome you back from the break, WFOV. I was just told you're back, so we're glad to have you back. So I'm just watching. I hope you'll watch with me along with what we're doing here. Watch and see how this investigation plays out, because we now know all the actors, or at least the ones on the surface, with some others to be identified as we do the investigation. And Bar, if you're doing your job, we'll know that by the fact that some people are going to have to pay for this, because this costs 2 years of time, and the lowest estimate I've heard, it cost the taxpayers $32 million on a hoax, the Russian hoax. And they're trying to say even today that the Mueller report said that they would have indicted the president if he had not been in office, but because you cannot indict a sitting president, they said that's the reason why the president was not indicted. That's not what the report says. The report placed a standard that's never existed before in this country. The report said they did not have sufficient evidence to exonerate the president. That's not our standard. The standard is, did you have enough evidence to bring about a verdict that the president committed what would have been, in this case here, if obstruction of justice, it would have been the creation of a felony on the part of the president. Collusion, by the way, which was the predicate for them doing the investigation, that's not even a crime. You can get information from every source and try to get an advantage. They do it all the time in politics. You'll take information from wherever you can get it from if it's going to help you and hurt your opponent. That's not illegal. Maybe you can pass a law about it if it offends you in the future, but it's not a law that says that that is a violation. But even if it were a violation, that's not what happened, because the Mueller report did not have any findings that occurred. And they should have asked Mueller, they never got around to asking this question, when did you know that had not occurred? Because at the point that he would have known about that investigation should have been stopped at that point. Because that was the whole predicate for the investigation, that there was Russian collusion with the Trump administration. And I don't know why we would even think that the Trump administration would have been the one endorsed by the Russians, because the one they were financing was Hillary Clinton and the Hillary Clinton Foundation. And then paying these exorbitant fees to Bill Clinton because they didn't expect Donald Trump to win. Why would you, in fact, be supporting Donald Trump when all the polls indicated he had no chance? So that doesn't make any sense. This is a framing of the president. But it raises questions about what else has occurred, because this could not have been the first time. What else has occurred in terms of the use of the intelligence community? Because I don't think you can kill a president in this country. You cannot kill a president in this country unless his security breaks down. And that has to be from within. Something inside of the security of John F. Kennedy broke down. And when I looked at the motorcade, I saw that in the motorcade route, because the motorcade route doesn't make any sense. Going down Main Street, could have continued down Main Street going to its destination that way, a straight shot with no turns. Or it could do what it did, turn on Houston Street, turning right, going north, going west on Main Street, turning right on Houston Street, going north now, and then going for a block, turning, look at all these turns, and then turning on Elm Street at a 120-degree angle. No Secret Service agency would approve that route if the intent was to protect the President of the United States. And we have not investigated why that route was taken, because it goes right into Dealey Plaza, where those shooters were. And I told you last week, that in one of our postings, one of the postings that we maybe put for a future posting, I showed where that that route was changed at the 11th hour. That was not the announced route on the 21st of November. That route was announced going down Main Street. Now, how those shooters already set up on Elm Street, if Elm Street wasn't known until the 11th hour, how are they there, positioned in that area there? Well, the motorcade was changed to take the president into that zone, the kill zone. That's what this book is talking about by Craig Roberts, the kill zone. So I want to see if they're going to investigate, at least let's investigate the recent event. You might not open up the Kennedy situation. At least open up and let's find out what occurred in the more recent event. But it would raise some other questions too about these early events as well. But at least we ought to get this one straight, since this is the one we're dealing with now in contemporary in a contemporary time zone. And we're going to see how they handle that. Okay, so the Kennedy assassination is very important. I want to also talk about something else that occurred in our politics that we've not looked at, and we have it all wrong in this regard as well, and that's with Barack Obama. We've not understood that election yet. Everybody's talking about Barack Obama was not a citizen of the United States, and I can tell you without any doubt that Obama was born in the United States. And I'll tell you why there are questions about it raised by some of the pundits, including Donald Trump before he became president. He wants to see Barack Obama's birth certificate. The reason why there are different stories about Barack Obama's birth is because Barack Obama told different stories about his birth based upon where he was at a point in time and how he benefited from it. When he was a student, it was beneficial for him to claim that he was a foreign student. If you look at his records, you will see, and I've seen those records that have been placed on in the public domain in some of the public areas. Not widely so, but some of the ones, you know what it looked. And it shows that he put himself as a foreign student. That's because he was getting aid from the outside at that point from claiming that he was Indonesian. Because that was the second marriage of his mom, and he was claiming that as his descendancy. Barry Soetoro. Now, the other thing was that when he ran for president, Barack Obama then claims that he was in fact born in Hawaii, which is where he was born in Hawaii. We have that. We know that to be true because the records in the hospital are very clear about that in 1961. Those records are there in that hospital, and he was born in that hospital. That's not the usurpation that we should be talking about with Barack Obama. There is a usurpation in place here, and everyone has missed it because we do not do our due diligence in looking at all of the information to bring it to a conclusive end based on all the evidence. The birthright is clear. The usurpation is not the place of birth. The mother comes back to do what they're doing right now. You don't want your child born outside the country. Too many benefits to be eschewed if that happens. She brings the child back in the country for the birth of the child. And you have people that are not even citizens doing the same thing. Barack Obama's usurpation is that, and the fraud he committed is that he was on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial on February the 10th, 2007, and he made his announcement that he's running for president of the United States. That was the usurpation of Barack Obama. That standing on those steps was a fraudulent standing on the part of, very conniving, very deceitful, very well thought out, but it was a usurpation in terms of standing there in the place of those who were descendants of former slaves. The idea of Abraham Lincoln, the Emancipation Proclamation, who freed the slaves, and now there's a person running for president, but it was not that person running for president because that person had no ancestry on that plantation. Barack Obama, being a black president, was black not because of anyone in America. He's black because of his father, who was from Kenya. Therefore, that usurpation was one in which all of the people in the country had missed. The blacks had missed it. Black people in America who are applauding Barack Obama have yet to awaken to the fact that Barack Obama stood in their place in their usurpation and took over from the fact that America was right at that point ready now to elect its first out in the open black president. Out in the open black president. Because I was on radio this past week and I was saying this, and I'm exactly right in saying it, that there have been black presidents in this country before, and the only reason that Barack is considered to be the first black president is because Barack Obama is the first one who came out and stated the fact. But it was not really true in Barack Obama's case, because if he is a black president, he's ineligible because his daddy was never an American. That's my argument. And I make it solely against all of the pundits, all the scholars out here who are talking out of their minds. I'm right and they're wrong. I admit that Barack Obama is darker than the others that would have occupied the presidency. But you see, I am talking about their pedigree. See, you might be confused about Rachel Dolezal. I know you said we went to a mother and a father, and they were white. So how is she claiming she's black? Well, maybe you don't know anything about genetics. Maybe you don't know that it's not just about your mother and your father. I took to the studio this past weekend at a radio station a copy of a book, a pamphlet called "The Five Negro Presidents," and on the front cover of the pamphlet, there's a picture of Warren G. Harding, who was elected in 1920. But on the same cover, there's Harding on one side, and there is his grand uncle on the same, in the same photograph on the front cover. There's his grand uncle. The grand uncle means that his father had the same granddaddy. Let me get this straight. Granduncle. His father had the same daddy as his granduncle. And the granduncle in that photograph is obviously a black person. Kinky hair, dark skin, etc., etc., etc. And if, in fact, the granduncle on that cover is black, without any question, then Warren G. Harding, who had the same father, you see, the granduncle will be the brother of their father. That's how he's a granduncle. Harding's granduncle. The grandfather So the grandfather of Warren G. Hardin, you can look at the granduncle, which would be the grandfather's brother, and see that that is a black person. So the grandfather and the granduncle have the same parents. We see the granduncle is a black person, so therefore Warren G. Hardin's grandfather was black. That's what I'm saying. So when Rachel Dolezal says that she was a black, and look at the parents, you can't stop there, because you might be looking at not at a mulatto, you may be looking at a quadroon or an octoroon. For example, with the same thing in the Queen Victoria, the Moorish influence. Queen Victoria is the granddaughter of Queen Elizabeth I, she is the daughter of Edward VI. If you understand that Sophia Charlotte, who was married to King George III, I have the documents, so I know what I'm talking about. I don't know what they're talking about. King George III was married to an octoroon named Charlotte Sophia, the same woman after whom Charlotte, North Carolina is named after. If you think in this country that you can live in this kind of proximity and no one has crossed over in terms of what you call miscegenation in this country, you are sadly mistaken. Barack Obama, if he were to be credited as a black president, and I don't credit him as a black president because if he was a black president, he's ineligible. I know the color would be darker, but I'm not talking about the color here. I'm talking about the fact that he's eligible to be president through his mother. His mother's from Kansas. His daddy is a black person, and that person is from Kenya. And he's never an American. If he is a black president, then he's not eligible to be president through his black ancestry, because he's not born of his father on the soil of the United States. That's his mom. And everyone has that wrong. I'm calling them on it because we're not a literate society anymore, is what I'm saying, basically. We're not a literate society. Because I'm looking at these scholars, and I can't believe that they can't figure this stuff out. It's amazing. We've had 7 black presidents in this country. I don't mean that they if you count Barack Obama, that's number 7 then. But let's look at the others. Just because it's not as detectable in the others as it was in Obama's case, let's go back and look at the ancestral roots of those other persons there. Let's look at the 3rd president, who was elected in 1800. Let you go find out who that is. That's Thomas Jefferson, by the way. Go look at the president in 1828. That's Andrew Jackson. Go look at these persons and look and see if they're not looking like Carol Channing, Hello Dolly, who admitted later on that she was black. Who thought that Carol Channing was black? Or when they came out in Hollywood recently and they had them come out and say, people in Hollywood you thought were white, they were in fact black, because it was so light. So don't too quickly dismiss Rachel Dolezal as being black, just because the parents. We're not just talking about the parents. If the parents were in fact mixed, that would make her mulatto. Probably be more evidence of a black person. But if the parents were in fact white, but they had black ancestors in back of them, they would have then been quadroon, and she would have been an octoroon, meaning 1/8. And 1/8 is enough ancestry to create a black child. That's why you could go 4 generations, from mulatto to quadroon, mulatto meaning black and white parents, quadroon meaning having a black parent in the grandparentage. Then you have the octoroon, the third generation, the fourth generation, to breed out that ancestral link. And so until you get to the fourth generation, those persons are still black at that point. So when Rachel Dolezal claims that she's black, I don't have no reason to doubt her by just looking at her parents, because maybe that's not the source of it. It could be 2 generations before that creates Rachel Dolezal. And Carol Channing was considered white up until the last part of her life when she admitted that she was black. So we have Thomas Jefferson, we have Andrew Jackson, 1828. There is Abraham Lincoln. Herndon, who was the law partner of Lincoln, said it was very dark. Very dark. And when they had a contest of a Lincoln lookalike, a black person entered the contest in the 1880s, 1890s, and won the contest because he looked more like Lincoln than anyone else did. And this is a black person that won the contest, because that's how dark Abraham Lincoln was. And how many persons read this about when Abraham Lincoln was taken to meet Mary Todd's parents? They told her that you had been a wayward daughter all your life. And now you come here to further embarrass us by bringing this Negro here. That's how they saw Abraham Lincoln at that point. So Lincoln is number 4. Warren G. Hard, 1920, is number 5. So who is number 6 and number 7? The one that's not named in J. Rogers' pamphlet, because he named 5 Negro presidents. Who is the one that he did not name, because the book came out in 1965, and that president was still alive as of 1969. Who would that president be? I have a picture of his grandmother, and that's Dwight Eisenhower. That's number 6. That's number 5. Number 6 is a peanut farmer. You can look at his lips and see it. And although you see his mother, you've never seen a picture of his father or his grandfather. And that's Jimmy Carter. And that's in the book written by Dr. Offset Bakufu. You can look at the photographs and see it. And Eisenhower, I have that in the book written by Tony Browder called The Nile Valley Civilization, where it's photographs of Eisenhower's grandmother, who I think was from Kentucky. There's been in other words, there are no cultures that are not mixed. And so the usurpation of Barack Obama is clear, but the usurpation is not the birth in a foreign place. The usurpation is standing up there illegitimately, standing on those steps when those steps had nothing to do. Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation had nothing to do with Barack Obama, because his father was not emancipated in Kenya by the Emancipation Proclamation. That's the usurpation in his case. Okay, I was supposed to have dealt with the duping of the NAACP, the Brown versus Board of Education ruling, and we will be dealing with that in our next episode, because that was a duping that went on there as well. And we'll also cover in our next episode the mythology of black leadership, so we can get back on track here about what really is going on here in this country, because a lot of things have to be pointed out here. Well, if you're going to correct this country and get on the right track, we've got to get the history straight. Our history has to be very clear in terms of what has occurred in our past. We have to have a very good understanding of what has happened in the past in order to go forward in the future. and live in harmony in the present. If we could understand our own history, we wouldn't have all this friction, because we would have a great understanding of who we are as a country. We are a very mixed population in America. It's impossible to be otherwise because of the fact that in the South, this enslaved population lived in close proximity to the enslaver population. That intermixture was very widespread. One book called Sex and Racism, written by Calvin Herndon, says that 80% of blacks in this country have mixed ancestry. 80%. And I don't know if you recall in England when Hitler was standing up there, he called England a race of Negroes. He didn't use the word Negroes; he used another word, but you get my point. Because of the mixture that was going on there. It wasn't just when they arrived over here there was mixing. There was mixing going on in Europe. Aristotle talks about it in a term called atavism, meaning that you look white, boom, there's a black child. And they had to have an explanation for it, and they said atavism, meaning a throwback into the earlier ancestry. So we've been mixing for a while, and all this racial tension and all that will go away if we understand our own history. We understand there's one family here. There's only one race in the first place, but we're one race because we're so mixed in terms of our ancestral roots in this country. Okay, that's it for today. We will talk about the duping of the NAACP in our next episode, and also the mythology of black leadership as we do our fourth program that we're putting in the can so we can begin to show it in my absence from the country when I leave out in about 4 or 5 days. Okay, want you to follow your dream as always. Don't forget, if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.